The vampire king pretended to sleep to test the maid, but what she did in the dark left him frozen. The castle of Lord Veyron stood like a dark sentinel on the edge of the forest. Its tall spires pierced the silver moonlight, and its walls seemed alive with whispers of the past. No ordinary light reached the inner halls, only the soft flicker of torches that danced along stone corridors carved centuries ago. Within these ancient walls lived the vampire king, a figure of power and fear, whose very presence could bend the air around him like a living shadow. Yet tonight, the castle was quiet, too quiet perhaps for those who knew its secrets. The corridors smelled of cold stone and candle wax, and the faint scent of old roses drifted from the grand gardens below. In this quiet, a soft figure moved like a whisper, Isolde, the maid. She carried a small tray of candles, her footsteps careful but purposeful. Every corner of the castle seemed to watch her, but she walked with courage, unaware of the eyes following her. Isolde had always felt a strange fascination with the castle, even with its gloom. Perhaps it was the history that clung to the walls, or perhaps it was the unspoken stories whispered by the shadows themselves. Tonight, she felt it more strongly than ever, as if the stones themselves were holding their breath, waiting. Unseen in the darkness of his chamber, Veyron watched. He reclined in his high-backed chair, pretending to sleep. His sharp features softened in the dim light, but even in rest, he radiated authority. No one had ever seen the true king so relaxed, yet tonight he had chosen to test the maid. For centuries, Veyron had ruled his realm with precision and strength. His people obeyed without question, and his enemies feared him. But the human heart, he had learned, was unpredictable, and in Isolde he sensed something extraordinary. She was not the first to serve him, but there was a spark in her, a quiet courage that dared to shine even under the shadow of his gaze. He had watched her for days, observing how she moved through the halls, how she spoke to the servants, and how she treated the small creatures of the castle gardens. Tonight, he would see her true nature. Isolde carried her tray carefully into the chamber. She had been told not to enter without permission, yet the king had never been so unguarded before. She paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly on the carved wooden door. The room was immense, filled with tapestries that told stories of battles long past, and a hearth whose fire had dimmed to glowing embers. The air smelled faintly of incense, and her pulse quickened as she stepped inside. "Your Majesty," she whispered, placing the tray on a nearby table, "I have brought more candles for the evening." No answer came. The room was still. Her eyes scanned the chamber, noting the king's figure in the shadows. He appeared asleep, pale face relaxed, black hair falling across his forehead. Yet something told her not to be entirely at ease. As she moved closer to the king's chair, her fingers brushed against an object on the floor, a small, golden amulet etched with symbols she did not recognize. It seemed to hum faintly under her touch, as if alive. Her curiosity pulled her closer, and before she realized it, she had lifted the amulet into her palm. A soft warmth spread through her hand, and the shadows in the room seemed to shift. A faint whisper reached her ears, almost like a sigh from the stones themselves. She froze, her heart hammering. "Who is there?" she whispered, though she knew no one had entered. The amulet's glow intensified, and a memory she had never lived filled her mind. A castle long ago, a king shrouded in darkness, and a maid who had walked these halls with courage that defied fear. The vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving her breathless. Veyron's eyes, unseen by her, glowed faintly in the darkness. His lips curved into a slight smile. She had found the amulet and, without knowing it, had awakened the first sign of an old, ancient magic, the kind of courage that could both inspire and terrify. She placed the amulet back gently and whispered, "Forgive me, I did not mean to disturb anything." Her words, soft and respectful, carried honesty and courage. That was what Veyron wanted to see. He wanted to know whether she would tremble in fear or act with care and insight. As she turned to leave, a sudden breeze swept through the room. The candles flickered violently, and a cold shadow moved across the floor. Isolde gasped, clutching the edge of the table. "It's only the wind," she whispered to herself, though her voice quivered. But the shadows seemed to twist in reply, curling like living things, moving in ways that the breeze could not explain. The amulet on the table pulsed once sharply, as if marking the presence of something unseen. Veyron's eyes opened slowly. The pretense of sleep vanished from his face, replaced by the calm, deliberate control of a predator watching his world. He remained silent, not moving, not revealing his awareness. Every flicker of the candlelight, every nervous breath of the maid was recorded in his mind. Isolde, feeling the sudden chill, turned her head and froze. She swore she had seen a figure standing in the corner, tall and silent. For a moment, fear gripped her like ice. But then she drew a steadying breath, whispering, "I will not falter. Whatever watches me will not find weakness here." Veyron's smile deepened, barely visible in the shadows. The maid's courage, her quiet defiance, thrilled him in ways he had long forgotten. She did not tremble or shrink from the unknown. Instead, she confronted it with intelligence and heart. She moved toward the door again, her hand on the handle. The shadows seemed to cling to her, almost following her, and a low hum filled the room, coming from the walls themselves. It was as if the castle were alive, aware of the maid who dared to walk among its secrets. And then, just as she reached the threshold, a sudden sound froze her steps. A soft click, almost like a sigh, came from the corner of the room. She looked up, heart racing, and saw nothing. But the air had shifted. The warmth of her courage was met with something colder, more ancient. Veyron stepped from the shadows in silence, his presence filling the room without a sound. The air itself seemed to bend toward him. Isolde's breath caught in her throat. She realized at the same instant that the king had been watching her all along. Every movement, every glance, every whispered word had been observed. Her mind raced. Should she bow? Should she apologize? Should she flee? Yet even in fear, she did not waver completely. There was a part of her, small but fierce, that refused to show total submission. Veyron studied her, his red eyes glinting faintly in the candlelight. For centuries, no human had inspired such curiosity, such fascination. He did not move closer, but the weight of his gaze was enough to hold her in place. "Courage," he said finally, his voice low, smooth, and like the brush of silk against stone. "You have it, little one, though you do not yet know how dangerous it can be." Isolde swallowed hard, her hands gripping the doorframe. I only wish to serve, my lord. I mean no harm." He inclined his head slightly, almost imperceptibly. Perhaps you are meant for something more." The castle seemed to pulse in response to his words. The amulet on the table glimmered once more faintly, as if acknowledging a destiny not yet understood. Isolde stepped back, trying to regain composure, but Veyron's eyes held hers, unyielding. "Remember this night," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "The darkness watches. But it is courage, not fear, that will decide its judgment." And with that, he retreated to the shadows, leaving her trembling but unbroken, the echo of his words lingering in her mind like a promise or a warning. As the door closed behind her, Isolde pressed her hand to her chest. She had survived the test, yet something deep inside told her that the night was only beginning. The castle, the shadows, and the king himself had left an impression she could not forget. And somewhere deep within the silent chamber, Veyron's eyes glowed faintly again. He had seen her soul in that brief encounter, and it had left him unsettled. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. The game had begun. The next morning the castle seemed unchanged. The corridors were quiet, the stone floors cold beneath Isolde's feet, and the faint scent of roses drifted in through the open windows. But for those who watched closely, nothing was ever truly quiet in Lord Veyron's castle. The shadows moved differently now, lingering where they had never lingered before, responding to courage as if it had awakened something dormant. Isolde carried her tasks with the same careful devotion as always, yet a sense of anticipation lingered. She felt it in the way the sunlight fell across the staircases, the way the torches flickered against the walls, and the subtle shift in the air whenever she approached the king's chambers. She did not know that Veyron himself had not slept at all that night, remaining in the shadows, studying her every movement. The first test of the day came unexpectedly. A tray of freshly baked bread slipped from her hands as she turned a corner. She braced herself, ready to catch the falling tray, when a low gust of wind seemed to rise from nowhere. The bread scattered across the floor and the candlelight flickered violently, casting strange, twisting shadows. From the shadows, Veyron observed silently. He had whispered to the castle the night before, letting it know that she was worthy of attention. Now, he watched her instinctively gather the scattered bread without hesitation, calmly placing it back on the tray. The way she handled small chaos with patience and composure pleased him. Not many would think to remain calm, he murmured to the empty room, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable edge of approval. Isolde did not hear him. She continued her work, placing trays and tidying the hallways, unaware that the king's eyes followed her like a shadow. Later, in the quiet of the afternoon, she was drawn toward a narrow hallway she had never explored. The light from the high windows barely touched the floor, leaving long, stretching shadows. There she discovered a door slightly ajar, behind which she heard a soft, rhythmic hum. Curiosity stirred within her, stronger than any fear. She stepped closer, listening. The humming grew louder, almost as if the walls themselves were singing. She paused, hand hovering over the doorframe. Inside, a strange artifact rested on a pedestal, a crystal orb swirling with faint, misty light. She felt an invisible pull toward it, and without understanding why, she reached out. The instant her fingers brushed the orb, the room seemed to shift. The air became heavier, thick with magic that had lain dormant for centuries. Whispers filled her ears, words she could not understand but whose meaning she felt deep in her heart: courage, choice, and destiny. Veyron had followed her, unseen, silent as the night itself. He watched the way she handled the orb, careful not to disturb it, yet curious enough to touch it. It was not fear that guided her, but a sense of wonder and respect. His red eyes glimmered in approval. "You walk paths others dare not," he whispered, so faintly that only the walls heard him. Isolde, unaware of his presence, lifted the orb gently, holding it against the soft light. Shadows twisted around her, drawn to her courage, and a faint warmth spread through her chest. For a moment the castle felt alive, not threatening but attentive, almost protective. Her moment of serenity, however, was broken by a sudden crash. A servant had tripped on the staircase, and a loud shout echoed through the hallways. Isolde turned, instinct taking over. She ran toward the sound, orb clutched against her chest, ready to help. She found the young servant trembling, nearly in tears, caught under a heavy cloak that had slipped from a rack. Without hesitation, she lifted the cloak and helped the servant to his feet, calming him with quiet words. Her bravery and compassion were natural, effortless, yet powerful. Veyron, still hidden in the shadows, leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. She did not know it, but she had passed the second test. Courage alone was not enough. She had shown kindness, intelligence, and selflessness, qualities that few possessed in a castle so steeped in power and fear. The afternoon waned and the castle's shadows grew longer. Isolde returned to her usual tasks, unaware that the king had decided to present her with a more subtle challenge. As she entered the grand hall to dust the long tables, a series of whispers drifted across the walls. They were soft, fleeting, almost playful, yet they carried a weight she could not understand. "Who is there?" she asked softly, her voice steady despite the strange feeling creeping up her spine. The shadows flickered. Objects seemed to move of their own accord. A chair shifted slightly, a book fell from a shelf. The whispers grew louder, forming words just beyond comprehension, calling her attention to hidden places and long-forgotten secrets. Isolde's instinct was not fear, but caution. She moved carefully, listening, observing. She knelt by the fallen book, opening it to reveal sketches of the castle, its people, and symbols that seemed almost alive on the pages. The whispers seemed to react to her touch, rising in volume as though approving of her careful handling. In the corners of the hall, shadows deepened, and she felt a presence. Not threatening, not harmful, but intensely aware of her every move. She knew someone watched her, yet her courage held steady. Her voice remained soft but firm as she whispered, "I mean no harm. I wish only to learn." The shadows seemed to pause, almost listening, and Veyron, hidden in the hall's dimmest corner, allowed himself a quiet laugh. He had never encountered such composure in a human before. Her bravery was tempered with wisdom, and her innocence with a keen understanding of the unknown. As dusk approached, he moved silently to a window, observing her reflection in the glass. She was unaware of how her movements, her bravery, and her intelligence drew the castle's attention, and his. Night fell quickly, and with it came a test Veyron had been planning for days. He would pretend to leave his chamber, luring her to the eastern wing, where the castle's oldest and most restless spirits resided. Isolde, diligent in her work, noticed that a candle had gone out in the eastern hallway. She instinctively went to relight it, unaware that this simple act would place her in the path of the king's carefully orchestrated test. The eastern wing was colder than the rest of the castle, the walls lined with portraits of kings and queens whose eyes seemed almost alive. The shadows clung to the corners, and a faint whisper of magic drifted through the air. As she approached the candle, the flame flickered violently. The temperature dropped, and a soft hum, almost like a song, filled the hall. Isolde's breath rose in small clouds, yet she stepped forward, determined to complete her task. She lit the candle carefully, murmuring words of reassurance to herself as much as to the shadows around her. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind swept through the hallway. The candle flickered out again, leaving her in near darkness. A figure moved just at the edge of the shadows, tall, silent, and impossibly still. Her heart raced, but she did not run. Instead, she took a cautious step forward. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. No answer came, only silence, and yet the air felt heavier. She realized that the figure, whoever it was, did not mean harm, but there was an intensity to its gaze, something powerful and ancient. She straightened her posture, holding herself with calm dignity. Veyron, unseen and unmoving, watched as she faced the shadows without flinching. Every instinct she displayed, caution, courage, respect, and resolve, was exactly what he had wanted to see. She was not afraid, but neither was she reckless. A soft chuckle escaped him, barely audible. The maid was unlike any human he had encountered. Her courage did not come from ignorance of danger, but from understanding it. And in that moment, he knew she had passed the most delicate of his tests so far. Before she could take another step, a faint glow appeared at the end of the hallway, a small orb of light, hovering as though waiting for her. It pulsed with gentle warmth, almost like a heartbeat. Without thinking, she reached out, allowing the orb to rest briefly in her palm. The shadows recoiled slightly, and the whispers faded to silence. Veyron finally stepped from the shadows, his presence filling the hallway without a sound. The candlelight caught the edge of his coat, the sharp angles of his face, and the faint red gleam in his eyes. Isolde froze, but her courage did not fail. She straightened, meeting his gaze without bowing, without apology, yet without arrogance. "Impressive," he said softly, voice smooth and commanding. "You face the shadows without flinching. That is rare." She swallowed, heart still racing. I did what seemed right, my lord." A faint smile curved his lips. "Yes, and in doing so you have proven more than I expected. Yet this is only the beginning. The castle holds more than shadows, and soon you will see that courage alone may not be enough. Isolde's fingers tightened slightly around the orb. I will do what I must, she whispered, determination in her voice. Veyron inclined his head, his eyes never leaving hers. The test was far from over, but for now he allowed her a moment of peace. Yet in the depths of the castle the magic stirred, sensing that its guardian, the Maid, was ready to awaken powers long forgotten. The hallway seemed to pulse in response to their silent understanding. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the eastern wing, a whisper rose, almost a warning. The one who awakens the light will awaken the darkness as well. Isolde did not hear it, but she felt its meaning. The night had only begun, and the castle's secrets, along with the king himself, were waiting to reveal their full depth. Night had settled over the castle like a velvet cloak. The moon's silver light spilled through the tall windows, painting the stone floors in pale patterns. Shadows curled in the corners of every hall, alive and watchful, yet none dared move closer to the figure that now paced the eastern wing. Isolde moved carefully, carrying the small orb she had found in the hallway the previous day. Its soft glow illuminated her path as she made her way to the chamber where the oldest and most powerful magic of the castle resided. She felt its pull in her chest, a mix of fear and curiosity. The whispers of the walls from the day before returned, faint and cautious, as if testing her resolve once more. She did not know that Veyron had followed her silently. No sound betrayed his presence. He moved like a shadow within the shadows. His eyes glowed faintly red, fixed on her every step. For centuries he had observed humans, but few had ever intrigued him as she did. Her courage was effortless, her presence commanding without arrogance, and most of all, she was unaware of the effect she had on him. The chamber ahead was vast and circular, its ceiling lost in shadow. Ancient tapestries lined the walls, depicting kings, queens, and warriors who had long since become spirits of history. In the center, a stone pedestal held the same orb that Isolde now carried. The air hummed with energy, thick with magic long dormant. Isolde approached the pedestal, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the orb down. She felt a warmth spread from it, almost like the heartbeat of the castle itself. The shadows in the room seemed to pull back, forming a space around her, as if giving her permission to act. "Isolde," a voice said, low and smooth, echoing through the chamber. She froze. The sound was unmistakable, the voice of the vampire king. Slowly she turned, and there he stood at the edge of the room, his presence commanding and unnerving. His coat brushed the stone floor, and his eyes glimmered with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You should not have come here alone," Veyron said softly, though there was no anger in his tone. "The chamber is dangerous, even for the brave." "I had to see," she whispered. "I could not ignore it. There is something here, something I must understand." He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Many have come seeking power or secrets, little one. Most leave in fear, or worse, never leave at all. And yet you are different. You do not seek to conquer, you seek only to understand." Isolde's heart pounded, not just from fear but from the strange pull she felt toward him. His presence was commanding, yet not threatening. It was as though the castle itself had lent him a part of its strength, and now she was caught between the awe of his power and the pull of her own courage. Veyron circled her slowly, silent as the shadows themselves. "You awaken things that have slept for centuries," he said. "The castle, its magic, even I am affected by your presence. Do you know what this means?" She shook her head slightly, though her hands gripped the edges of the pedestal. "No, I only know that it feels alive, and it calls to me." He stopped in front of her, the faint red gleam of his eyes reflecting the orb's light. "You are not wrong," he murmured, "but the castle does not give its secrets freely. It tests those who enter its heart, and tonight you will be tested again." Before she could respond, the chamber darkened. Shadows twisted violently, and a cold wind swept through the room. The orb's light flickered, and the whispers returned, louder this time, almost urgent. Isolde stepped back instinctively, though her courage did not fail her. "What is happening?" she asked. "The castle is alive," Veyron said softly, his voice calm amidst the storm of magic. "It recognizes courage, yes, but it also reacts to fear, and right now it senses yours." "My fear?" she asked, heart hammering. "I am not afraid." "You may believe so," he replied, "but the shadows know. They test all who enter this chamber. Even you with your bravery must face what lies ahead." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, spectral form wrapped in tattered black robes. Its face was hidden, but its presence radiated an intense cold. The air grew heavier, and Isolde felt a chill creep through her body. Veyron moved instinctively in front of her, placing himself between her and the figure. "Do not move," he commanded, his voice low and steady. "The creature responds not to force, but to intent. Show it courage, and it may not harm you." Isolde swallowed, her fingers tightening around the orb. She could feel the pulse of its energy through her hands, and she realized that it was not just the castle testing her, but the very magic of the realm. The figure stepped closer, its shadowy robes brushing the floor like liquid night. Who are you?" Isolde asked, voice firm despite the trembling in her chest. The figure did not answer. Instead, it raised a hand slowly, pointing at the pedestal. The orb pulsed brighter, as if responding to its gesture. Veyron's red eyes never left the figure. "It is a guardian," he said. "It watches the castle's heart, and tonight it tests you as it has tested me for centuries." Isolde's mind raced. She had faced shadows and whispers, but this felt different. This was not merely the castle reacting, it was alive, aware, and intelligent. She took a deep breath, her hand steadying as she looked at the orb. "I am not here to harm," she said, voice clear and firm. "I only wish to protect what is sacred." The figure paused. The shadows around it seemed to flicker, almost as if considering her words. Veyron's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her closely. Her courage, tempered with honesty, was enough to hold the attention of the ancient guardian. Then, without warning, the figure moved. It reached toward the orb, and a wave of cold energy shot across the room. Isolde instinctively raised her hands, letting the warmth of her courage radiate outward. The orb's light flared, pushing back the darkness in a soft glow that surrounded her. Veyron's expression shifted, a flicker of admiration passing across his sharp features. She did not know it, but in that moment she had touched something in him long hidden, a part of his heart that had been frozen by centuries of isolation and fear. The guardian recoiled slightly, as if startled by the strength of her presence. The orb's glow pulsed again, this time stronger, and the shadows around them seemed to hesitate. "You are remarkable," Veyron said quietly, stepping closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Few could face such a test and emerge unbroken, yet this is only the beginning. There is more you must understand and more you must face. Courage alone may not suffice." Isolde looked at him, her eyes wide. "I will do what I must," she said. Her voice held the conviction of someone who had faced fear and chosen bravery, no matter the cost. The guardian's figure began to fade, slipping back into the shadows from which it had emerged. The room calmed, though a subtle hum remained, like the heartbeat of the castle itself. The orb glowed steadily, casting a gentle light across their faces. Veyron studied her, his expression unreadable. "You have done well," he said. "But know this, the castle, its magic, and we are not as we seem. There are forces at play here that neither of us fully control. You have awakened a prophecy, one that has lain dormant for centuries." Isolde's brow furrowed. "A prophecy?" she asked. "About me?" "Not only about you," he replied. "It concerns both of us and the future of this castle. What you have done tonight is only the first step. Soon, you will face choices that may change the very course of destiny." A silence settled between them. The only sound was the soft pulse of the orb, as if echoing the weight of his words. Isolde realized that her life had changed in a single night. The castle, the shadows, and the vampire king himself were no longer merely part of her world. They were intertwined with her fate. Veyron took a slow step back, his eyes never leaving hers. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow the castle will demand more of you, and when it does, you must be ready." Isolde nodded, her mind racing with questions, but also with a strange sense of resolve. She understood now that her courage had not just been a test, it had set events into motion that could not be undone. The castle, with all its ancient magic and dark secrets, had accepted her, and Veyron had noticed. As she left the chamber, the orb's glow faded slightly, but its warmth lingered in her hands. The shadows seemed to follow her, not threatening but observant. She knew that the night had only begun, and that the castle's true challenges were yet to come. In the deepest corner of the eastern wing, Veyron watched her retreating figure. For centuries, he had never felt such a stirring within his heart, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something more. Something he did not yet understand. A faint whisper echoed through the chamber. "The one who awakens the slumbering king will freeze his heart, yet melt the curse's shadow." Veyron's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in centuries a chill ran through him, not from the cold of the castle but from the weight of the prophecy. The game had deepened. The stakes had grown higher. And both the maid and the king were bound together in a destiny that neither could escape. The castle was alive with whispers that night. Shadows stretched and flickered along the walls, following every movement of Isolde as she carried the glowing orb through the corridors. Its soft light illuminated her path, painting her face with gentle warmth, yet she could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon her. Every step she took seemed heavier than the last, as though the castle itself tested her resolve. Veyron followed silently, moving like a shadow within the shadows. For centuries he had been untouchable, a ruler of darkness and fear. But tonight, the stirring in his chest, the feeling that had begun the night before, had grown stronger, pulling him into a strange vulnerability he had never known. The prophecy lingered in his mind. The one who awakens the slumbering king will freeze his heart, yet melt the curse's shadow. He had watched her through countless corridors, unseen, fascinated by the way she navigated danger with courage and grace. Her presence had begun to awaken something within him, a warmth, a spark of life he thought long lost. Yet the castle's magic, ancient and unpredictable, had more tests in store for both of them. They reached the chamber at the heart of the eastern wing. The air was thick with energy, the walls shimmering faintly in response to the orb. Shadows danced across the floor, twisting into shapes both strange and beautiful, reflecting centuries of history and power. The orb pulsed with a soft light, almost like a heartbeat, echoing the tension in Isolde's chest. Before she could place the orb on the pedestal, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles, plunging the room into darkness. From the shadows emerged the guardian, a spectral figure wrapped in tattered robes, its face hidden beneath a hood. The air around it chilled the bones, and whispers filled the chamber, carrying warnings from ages past. Isolde stepped forward instinctively, holding the orb close. "I am not afraid," she whispered, her voice steady though her heart raced. "I only wish to protect the castle." The guardian advanced, its presence heavy and oppressive. Veyron moved beside her, placing himself in front, a protective shield of shadow and power. "Do not falter," he said softly, his voice low but commanding. "Its strength lies in testing your intent. Show it courage and it will yield." Isolde drew a deep breath. The warmth of the orb in her hands seemed to spread into her chest, filling her with a calm she had not felt before. She stepped forward, facing the guardian without flinching. "I will not harm you," she said firmly. "I mean no harm to this castle or its magic. I only wish to help." For a moment the guardian hesitated, its shadowy form wavering. The whispers faded, replaced by a low hum that resonated through the chamber like a pulse. Veyron's red eyes narrowed, watching intently. He had never seen anyone face the Guardian with such clarity and strength. The centuries of isolation that had frozen his heart stirred within him, shifting as he realized the truth. Her courage was not merely bravery, it was purity of heart. The Guardian extended a hand toward the orb. A wave of cold energy swept across the room. Isolde raised her hands instinctively, letting the warmth of her resolve shine outward. The orb flared brightly, its light spreading to fill the chamber. The shadows twisted and recoiled, and the spectral figure began to fade, slipping back into the darkness from which it had emerged. Veyron exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on Isolde. "You have done it," he whispered. "Few could face such a force and remain unbroken. Yet this is not the end. The prophecy, it is not yet complete." Isolde placed the orb gently on the pedestal. Its glow stabilized, casting a soft light across the chamber. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice calm but determined. He stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the orb's light. "You must trust me," he said. "The castle, the Guardian, the shadows, they respond to intent. Courage alone may not suffice. You must choose to believe in what is greater than fear, greater than power, greater than even me." Her eyes met his, and she saw not just a king, but a being who had lived for centuries in darkness, his heart frozen by fear and control. She realized that the prophecy was not only about her bravery, it was about awakening him as well. "I trust you," she said simply. "I believe in what is right." The orb pulsed brighter, and the chamber trembled lightly as the magic of the castle responded. Shadows retreated, and the oppressive weight lifted. Veyron felt a shift within himself, centuries of cold isolation melting away under the warmth of her trust. His immortal heart, long frozen, stirred with the faintest flicker of life. A soft smile curved his lips, rare and almost human. "You have done what I could not," he said quietly. "You have brought light where there was only shadow." Isolde stepped closer to the pedestal, feeling the magic hum beneath her fingers. The orb's light reflected in Veyron's eyes, and for a moment time seemed suspended. The prophecy's meaning became clear. The slumbering king's heart could be awakened, the curse of isolation lifted, but only through courage, trust, and selfless intention. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed through the chamber, a whisper carried from the castle itself. "The one who awakens the light must also face the darkness. Only then will the bond be complete." Veyron's gaze darkened slightly, aware that the castle's trials were not over. A new shadow emerged in the corner, more solid than the Guardian before, its form twisting like smoke, yet exuding a palpable threat. The castle's magic had summoned a final test, a force of darkness meant to challenge both of them. Isolde turned to face it, and Veyron stepped beside her. "Do not let it frighten you," he said. "We face it together." The shadow surged forward, swirling around them like a storm. Veyron extended his hands, channeling his power, but it was Isolde who took the first step, raising the orb. Its light flared, meeting the darkness directly. The shadows shrieked and writhed, but she did not falter. Her courage, her belief, and her unwavering heart pushed the darkness back. Veyron joined her, their powers merging, the warmth of her humanity blending with the strength of his immortal essence. The chamber shook as light and shadow collided, yet the darkness could not overcome the purity of her intent. Slowly, the shadow began to dissolve, fading into nothingness, leaving only calm and light in its place. They stood together in the center of the chamber, the orb glowing softly between them. Veyron looked at her, and for the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to feel fully trust, admiration, and something far deeper stirring in his heart. "You," he began, his voice low, almost uncertain. "You have changed everything. Even I feel different. Something long lost has returned." Isolde met his gaze, her own heart racing, yet calm. "The castle tests all who enter its heart," she said softly, "but we face it together. That is how darkness is overcome." Veyron exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. He reached out, gently taking her hand. The orb's light pulsed in harmony with the sudden connection between them. He realized that his heart, once frozen by centuries of fear and control, had begun to awaken, not fully, not yet, but enough to know that trust, courage, and selfless love could redeem even the darkest soul. The chamber seemed to respond, the shadows receding to the corners, the whispers calming to a gentle hum. The castle itself had accepted her. It had accepted both of them. For a long moment they stood silently, hands clasped, breathing in the calm of the victory. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not through power alone, but through courage, trust, and compassion. Veyron finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. The curse is lifted. The shadows, they obey now, as do the ancient forces of this castle. You have done more than awaken me. You have freed this place from centuries of fear. Isolde smiled faintly. We did it together, she said. I could not have done it alone. The orb's glow began to fade gently, its purpose fulfilled, leaving only a warm, steady light that illuminated the chamber. Veyron released her hand slowly, but his gaze remained locked on hers, filled with an intensity and warmth he had never shown to anyone before. Outside, the moon rose high, bathing the castle in silver light. For the first time in centuries, it seemed less foreboding, less cold, and more alive with possibility. And in the silence that followed, a final whisper echoed through the stone halls. He who was frozen will awaken only at the touch of true courage. She has touched it, and so has he. Veyron's lips curved into a faint, almost human smile. For the first time in centuries, he did not feel alone. The frozen heart had begun to beat again, stirred by the courage, trust, and unwavering heart of a simple maid who dared to face the darkness and choose light. The castle was quiet now, but it held a promise of new beginnings, of bond forged in courage and trust, and of a destiny shared between two souls who had been tested by shadows and emerged stronger together. And somewhere deep within the eastern wing, the faint glow of the orb lingered, a reminder that even the darkest places could be transformed by light, courage, and love.